The air in southern Louisiana hung heavy that morning, thick with humidity and the whispers of breaking news. 1 minute ago, the story hit every feed and every fan page. Troy Landry from Swamp People is breaking the news. The word spread faster than a summer storm, rolling through the bayou and far beyond. In a region where stories move slower than the river, this one moved like fire. People who'd grown up watching the King of the Swamp couldn't believe what they were hearing. Something had changed. Something big. For over a decade, Troy Landry was the symbol of Cajun grit. A man who turned gator hunting into art and danger into legacy. His voice, that thick, proud accent, carried through living rooms around the world. Now that same voice was trembling, not from fear, but from something deeper. No one expected this. Not from Troy. Not from the man who faced down storms, beasts, and time itself with that same steady grin. But the truth had come crawling out of the swamp, and it was his turn to face it. The news broke through an early morning stillness in Pierre Part. Locals stopped at gas stations, phones in hand, replaying a single clip, a porch, a bayou, and Troy Landry sitting quiet before the world. For many, Troy wasn't just a television figure. He was family, a reflection of every Cajun father and grandfather who rose before dawn, worked hard, and came home smelling of mud and diesel. He was a man who turned survival into poetry. Fans remembered his first appearance on Swamp People, calling out "Choot" with the same fire that made him a legend. Behind that catchphrase was a life defined by perseverance. But that same fire, it seemed, was now burning low. For months, whispers had floated through fan forums. Some said Troy looked tired on recent episodes. Others noticed he'd been missing from promotional shoots. Still others claimed he'd been spotted in Baton Rouge hospitals, walking slow but smiling for pictures. When word came that Troy would be releasing a statement, fans assumed it was another show update. Maybe a new season, maybe a family spin-off. No one thought it would be personal. No one imagined it would sound like goodbye. Then, without warning, the video appeared on Troy's official page. No fancy intro, no music, just him, the bayou behind him, and the gentle hum of cicadas. The lighting was soft, the air still. It felt more like a confession than an announcement. "I've been holding this in for a while now," he began, his voice low, his accent thick with emotion. "The swamp's my home, but lately, I've been fighting something I can't catch or shoot." Those words hit fans like a wave. Troy wasn't a man of drama. When he spoke, he meant it. He explained that he'd been battling health issues, chronic pain, fatigue, and nights where even sleep brought no rest. Doctors told him to slow down. He told them the swamp doesn't wait. But now his body was saying what his pride wouldn't. He needed to stop, at least for a while. "This old body's been good to me," he said with a small smile, "but she's starting to talk back." It wasn't a farewell, not exactly. Troy promised he wasn't disappearing, just stepping back. He'd still be around, guiding his sons Chase and Jacob, watching from the porch. But for now, the Gator King was laying down his rifle. Fans flooded social media with messages of love and disbelief. Hashtags like #ForeverChootum and #KingOfTheSwamp trended within hours. Some cried, some prayed. All agreed this was the end of an era. But beneath that porchlight video, there was a heaviness Troy hadn't yet revealed. Those close to him knew this was only part of the story. His battle wasn't just against pain. It was against time, memory, and the pull of the swamp that wouldn't let him go. Crew members later admitted that Troy's struggles had been visible for years. He'd show up limping, one said, and still be the first on the boat. He'd laugh, say, "Ain't no pain bigger than a gator's bite," and go right back to work. Behind the grin, though, the toll was real. Decades of physical labor, harsh sun, and endless pressure had left scars that no camera ever caught. His family had begged him to slow down. He never listened until his body made the choice for him. After the announcement, fans thought he'd finally rest. They were wrong. Barely a month later, strange reports started surfacing from deep inside the Atchafalaya Basin. Locals spoke of aggressive gators, destroyed nests, and strange discoloration in the water. The Wildlife and Fisheries Department was baffled. It didn't take long for Troy to hear. "When the swamp calls, you answer," he said simply. Against doctor's orders, he grabbed his gear, called his sons, and headed back into the water. The cameras followed. Not for a show episode, but because history was unfolding again. The king was returning to his throne, not for fame, but for duty. Out there, under the cypress and Spanish moss, Troy found what he feared most: something unnatural. Gators behaving erratically, fish floating dead near slicks of oil-like residue, and water that smelled wrong. He reported it immediately, and soon wildlife officials confirmed what everyone feared. The swamp was sick. Something was poisoning its heart. Troy joined the investigation, helping officials trace the contamination. "This ain't about hunting no more," he told a reporter. "It's about saving the only home I ever had." Days turned into weeks of searching. Then came the discovery that changed everything. While guiding his son Chase through a remote stretch of the Basin, Troy noticed a rusted sign half buried in reeds. He pulled it free, brushed off the grime, and froze. Landry and Sons Dock, 1959. It was his daddy's dock, the one hurricane seasons had supposedly taken decades ago. Beneath the collapsed structure, Troy and his sons unearthed something else: half-submerged barrels, rusted and leaking into the water. At first, they thought it was old debris. Then the smell hit them. Chemical, sharp, wrong. Troy immediately contacted local authorities. Within hours, the area was sealed off. The EPA soon confirmed it: hazardous waste. Dozens of barrels illegally dumped sometime in the 1980s. The swamp wasn't dying naturally, it had been poisoned. For Troy, the revelation was a knife to the gut. Not only was his home under attack, but the pollution sat right beneath the remains of his family's original dock, the place where his father, Duffy Landry, taught him everything. The story exploded across Louisiana. National outlets picked it up. Swamp People star uncovers toxic dump in Bayou. Troy went from reality legend to whistleblower overnight, and with the spotlight came suspicion. Investigators found old transport records near the site, some bearing the name Landry and Sons Marine. Suddenly, whispers turned into questions. Had Troy's own father unknowingly been tied to the dumping? The thought haunted him. For days, Troy refused interviews. He sat alone on his porch, watching the bayou flow as if it held answers. His sons later said they'd never seen him so quiet. When he finally spoke to the press, his words were simple and raw. "My daddy was a good man. He hauled what he was told to haul. Nobody ever said what was in them barrels." EPA documents eventually confirmed his truth. Duffy Landry's company had been subcontracted by a major corporation later charged with illegal dumping. The Landrys had no knowledge of what they'd been transporting. The relief was bittersweet. The swamp was still dying, and Troy's fight was only beginning. He launched what became known as the Landry Swamp Restoration Project. With the help of local universities and environmental groups, he vowed to restore the waters that had raised his family. "This ain't just cleanup," he said. "It's redemption, for the swamp and for us." The History Channel quickly greenlit a special miniseries, Heart of the Swamp, chronicling the journey. Fans tuned in by the millions to watch Troy and his sons rebuild what generations had nearly lost. Scenes showed him knee-deep in mud, planting cypress saplings with his grandkids, his laughter echoing through the trees. If we fix it now, maybe they won't have to. But not all moments were easy. There were days when Troy could barely lift his arm. His health faltered under the strain, yet he refused to stop. Bernita, his wife, stood by him through it all. "He ain't got quit in him," she said softly, "even when he should." One moment during filming became iconic. Troy stood before the camera holding two jars, one with clean water from upriver, one with the polluted muck from his dock. His voice cracked as he said, "This is what they did, and this is what we fightin' to bring back." That image went viral, igniting donations and awareness campaigns across the South. Suddenly, Troy wasn't just a gator hunter. He was a symbol of Louisiana's resilience. But fame came with danger. Anonymous letters began arriving, warning him to stay quiet. Some of the companies linked to the dumping were still powerful, still connected. Troy shrugged it off. "I've stared down worse things with teeth," he said with a grin. But his sons worried. The stress was taking its toll. Even so, the project grew. Thousands volunteered. Entire communities joined cleanups, planting trees, and rebuilding wetlands. The swamp was healing, and so was Troy. As months passed, the History Channel cameras captured something rare. Not drama, not danger, but peace. A man who had fought everything finally learning to let go. By late summer, photos surfaced of Troy fishing quietly with his grandkids. No gators, no cameras, just still water and laughter. "I done enough shooting," he joked. "Now I just wait for the fish to bite." The finale of Heart of the Swamp aired 6 months later. Millions tuned in. The episode opened with a sunrise over the Atchafalaya, golden mist curling above the water. Troy stood on a newly rebuilt dock, the same spot where his father once tied his boat. His hands were rough, his shoulders still strong, but there was softness in his eyes. The years had taken much, but given him something greater: perspective. He looked out over the swamp and began to speak. "This place don't belong to one man. It belongs to everyone who loves her enough to fight for her." He paused, looking down at the water that had been both his battleground and his home. "We only borrow her for a little while, and when we're gone, she keeps on going. That's how it's supposed to be." Then, with that familiar grin, he removed his camouflage cap, twirled it once in his hand, and tossed it into the bayou. The hat floated for a moment, then slowly drifted away, rippling across the water like a farewell. As the camera pulled back, Troy's voice lingered one last time. "Don't worry about me. I'll still be round. Just maybe not every day." The screen faded to black. Silence. Then the sound of distant frogs and cicadas, carrying through the credits. For fans, it wasn't the end. It was a reminder of what Troy had always stood for: family, tradition, and the soul of a place too wild to ever truly tame. Across Louisiana, porch lights flickered that night over quiet bayous. Some swore they could almost hear him laughing somewhere out there, the echo of a man who gave his life to the swamp and asked nothing in return. In the end, Troy Landry didn't just hunt gators. He hunted truth. He hunted redemption. And when he found it, he shared it with the world. To the people of the Bayou, he'll always be more than a man. He's a legend carved in mud and water, a story that will outlive the cameras. Because in the swamp, legends don't fade. They float. And somewhere tonight, under the same stars that once guided him home, the water still whispers his name. Choot 'em, Troy. Always. Even after the finale, the ripples of his story didn't fade. Weeks later, residents from all over southern Louisiana began sending photos of the swamp's slow revival. Clear water, returning herons, fresh blooms rising through the muck. They called it Troy's Second Spring. The History Channel released unseen footage, moments too quiet for television, like Troy sitting alone before dawn, whispering a Cajun prayer. "Merci, mon Dieu, for letting me do what I love." It wasn't for the cameras, it was for the swamp itself. Tourists started coming, not to hunt, but to learn. Kids from schools in Baton Rouge and Lafayette took field trips into the Basin, planting young cypress and listening to guides tell stories about the man who saved the swamp. Troy's legacy had turned from entertainment into education. Local musicians wrote songs about him, fiddle tunes and swamp blues carrying his name. One old Cajun band even released a ballad titled "Choot 'em, but Save 'em Too." It played on radio stations from Baton Rouge to New Orleans, its chorus echoing across bayou nights. But legends in Louisiana never rest. One foggy evening, just months after the final broadcast, Chase Landry took his boat deep into the marsh to check traps. He swore he heard something, a faint splash, a voice calling through the mist. It wasn't haunting, it was familiar. He cut the engine, listening. The air hung still, heavy with the smell of rain and cypress. Then, through the silence, came a sound that made him smile. The soft hum of his daddy's old airboat engine, far off in the dark, like it was running one last time. Chase told no one that night, not because he was scared, but because in Louisiana some things you don't question. The swamp keeps her own secrets, and the dead don't always stay quiet when they've still got work to do. Weeks later, a letter arrived at the History Channel's offices in New York. No return address. Inside was a small glass jar filled with swamp water, clear as crystal. A note read, in neat handwriting, "She's healing. Thank you. TL." Experts dismissed it as a fan tribute, but those who'd been there, who'd known Troy, couldn't help but wonder. The handwriting looked too real, too right. Bernita kept the porch light on, just as Troy always did when someone was out on the water. She said it wasn't for him exactly. It was for the promise that he made. He said the swamp ain't never dark if someone keeps the light burning. That light became a local landmark. Travelers driving through Pierre Part at night could see it glowing softly through the moss, like a beacon. Some said it flickered when the wind blew from the basin, as if answering something unseen. 1 year later, the Landry Swamp Restoration Project completed its first full cleanup. Over 10,000 volunteers came together, from fishermen to college kids. They released baby gators into newly restored waters, each tagged with the initials TL on their markers. Jacob Landry gave a short speech that day. "My daddy taught me that a man don't measure life in money or fame. You measure it by what you leave behind. And I reckon he left behind a whole lot of love." The crowd fell silent. Then, in a moment no one planned, hundreds of voices shouted at once, "Choot 'em!" Not in defiance, but in celebration. It echoed through the cypress, a call of unity and remembrance. Afterward, a small memorial was erected near the old Landry dock, a simple wooden sign carved with Troy's name, his favorite saying, and the words, "Forever the King of the Swamp." Locals still bring flowers, shells, and even gator teeth to lay at its base. But perhaps the greatest tribute came not from people, but from the swamp itself. The following spring, for the first time in decades, a rare white egret was seen nesting near the old dock. In Cajun folklore, white egrets are signs of protection, spirits guarding sacred ground. Chase stood there watching it one morning, his reflection trembling on the water. "He's still here," he whispered, "still watching." The wind stirred, the trees rustled, and for a moment the bayou felt alive again, not just with sound, but with memory. Because in Louisiana, legends never really die, they just go back to the water. The years rolled on, but the legend of Troy Landry only grew deeper in the mud and memory of Louisiana. Tour guides and airboats told his story as if it were scripture. They pointed to the cypress trees and said, "That's where he found the barrels," or to the old dock and whispered, "That's where he heard the swamp talk back." Documentaries came and went, but none captured the spirit of the man like the people did. They spoke of him not as a celebrity, but as a neighbor, the kind who'd pull over on a dirt road just to help fix a flat, who'd share a beer and a story whether he knew your name or not. Chase and Jacob carried the torch quietly. They kept hunting, not for fame but for balance, taking only what the swamp gave. "Daddy said we ain't conquerors," Jacob once told a reporter. "We're caretakers. We just do our part." Over time, the swamp itself began to change. The waters cleared. The fish came back stronger, brighter. Even the gators seemed calmer, less restless. Locals swore the basin was breathing easier, like a wound finally closing. In Pierre Part, the old Landry home became a gathering place. Tourists dropped by, hoping to meet the family, take a photo by the porch where Troy once filmed his final message. Bernita greeted them all with that same warmth, her eyes misting every time someone said his name. She kept that porch light burning year-round, a soft golden flame against the night. Some said that when fog rolled through, it looked like the glow of an airboat lamp drifting across the yard. "That's him," "Checking in," she'd say with a smile. The state of Louisiana eventually declared the Atchafalaya Basin's recovered zone a protected wildlife sanctuary. They named it the Landry Conservation Corridor. When the ribbon was cut, even the governor called it a victory for every Cajun heart that ever beat for the Bayou. Reporters asked Chase what the dedication meant. He said, "Means my daddy's still workin', just on the other side now." That night, the ceremony ended with fiddles and accordions, old swamp songs rising into the humid air. Families danced barefoot in the grass, their laughter floating over the dark water. Somewhere, deep in the distance, a bull gator bellowed, long, low, and almost proud. Months later, another strange letter arrived, this time sent to the local newspaper. It contained no name, no return address, only a Polaroid. In the photo, a moonlit swamp, perfectly still, and a figure in a small boat wearing a wide-brimmed hat, face turned away. The caption beneath read, "Still watchin'." The editor thought it was a prank, but when they showed the image to Bernita, she didn't speak for a long time. She just touched the photo and whispered, "He always did love the night water." As the years passed, Troy's story became folklore. Campfire tales mixed with fact and faith. Some said he became a guardian spirit of the swamp, that when danger came, his presence warned the hunters, his voice carried through the fog. Old men swore they'd seen ripples where no wind blew, heard laughter under the hum of crickets. Kids claimed if you whispered "Choot 'em" at midnight, you'd hear an engine start somewhere far off, just for a second. Even skeptics couldn't deny the strange peace that settled over the basin. The swamp, once poisoned and dying, now thrived, as if guided by unseen hands. One summer storm nearly undid the progress. Torrential rain and wind ripped through the basin, tearing trees and flooding homes. For days the sky stayed gray and the water black, but when the storm broke, the Landry dock still stood, untouched, dry as bone. Locals said the water curved around it, refusing to take what belonged to him. Scientists called it coincidence. The Bayou called it loyalty. In the years that followed, the Landry family continued Troy's work. They expanded the restoration effort to other parishes, helping communities clean their waterways and plant protective marshland. The movement spread across the South, inspired by one man's promise to never stop fighting for home. Swamp People ended its final season with a tribute episode. Clips of Troy's laughter, his iconic shout, and a slow montage of sunsets over the bayou. The last image showed his empty chair on the porch, the light glowing behind it. The narrator's voice trembled slightly as he said, "Some men live for the hunt. Others live for the home it gives them." Troy Landry did both. When the credits rolled, viewers across the country left their televisions on, listening to the soft sounds of frogs and wind in the trees. It felt like a benediction, a goodbye that wasn't really goodbye. In Pierre Part, a mural appeared on the side of the local bait shop, a painting of Troy smiling from his boat, gator on the line, sun breaking behind him. The words above read, "The swamp don't forget her own." Every spring, on the anniversary of his final message, families gather at the dock to release paper lanterns over the water. Each one carries a handwritten note, a thank you, or just 3 words, "Choot 'em, Troy." The lanterns drift across the surface, tiny sparks reflecting in the ripples. And sometimes, just as the last one fades from sight, a ripple stirs, a slow, steady wake, like something unseen moving beneath. Children point, laughing. The old-timers just nod. They've seen it before. They know better than to fear it. Because in the bayou, some legends live forever, and as long as the swamp still breathes, so does he. Troy Landry, the king of the swamp, the heart of the Atchafalaya, may have gone quiet. But the water remembers, the trees remember, the people remember. And somewhere out there, under a canopy of stars and cypress, a boat engine hums softly in the dark, steady, eternal, and unmistakable. The swamp keeps her promises, and so does Troy.